So good. Well, we're in week 2 of our series, How Then Shall We Live, which is seeking to answer that very question. How shall we live? And we're doing that by looking at a letter that a guy called Paul wrote to a church in a city called Corinth nearly 2 millennia ago. And Paul's inspiration and his motivation in everything that he did was to tell other people about the great news of the gospel, the great life that could be experienced through knowing and following Jesus. And so tonight we're going to be taking a peek at a topic of conversation that Paul clarified in his letter to these people on how to live as a follower of Jesus, even when they were being tempted to return to their old way of life. Temptation. It's a battle of the heart, and that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. But first I thought we'd begin with a little history quiz, something a little bit different. If you're under the age of 25, 26, I'll be really impressed if you know the answer to this. Because in 1983, Bob Hawke, the then Australian Prime Minister, said the following words on national TV. So this is our Prime Minister. Ready? Any boss who sacks anyone for not turning up to work today is a bum. Now, here's the question. Can anybody tell me what sporting achievement prompted the Prime Minister? Oh, someone's on board already. The Australia. Good work. And Elaine, you weren't even born when that happened. I tried, Elaine. All right. That's it. Australia 2 won the 1983 America's Cup, which is a sailing race if you're not into sailing. So America 2 was a sailing yacht, captained by a guy called John Bertrand. You may or may not have heard of him. And they won the 1983 America's Cup. And in doing so, the Aussies knocked off the Americans, breaking a 132-year stranglehold that America had had on the America's Cup trophy. To this day, it is still the longest winning streak in the history of sport. It was massive, a huge moment in sport. And the secret to the yacht's success was what was going on beneath the waterline. It all started with a guy who passed away earlier this year, actually, Alan Bond. He was a flamboyant and quite a controversial businessman from Australia, and he set out to win this cup, this America's Cup, by any means necessary. And so he hired a guy by the name of Ben Lexon to design this new yacht, which would beat the American boat. Now, this guy Lexon, genius, this guy was legit. And so he designed this new yacht with a game-changing winged keel. Now, I didn't know what a keel was until a few days ago because I Googled it. The keel is on the hull or the bottom of the boat, and it sticks down. And the role it plays is it provides stability, and it gives a boat better directional control. At the end of the day, it helps the yacht to be steered better. It's a stabilizer. And Lexon's innovative and unique keel design was new. No one had ever seen it before. And it was one of the main reasons that this boat, this yacht, Australia 2, was so fast yet also really stable and maneuverable. But this keel design was also super controversial, mainly because it gave the Aussies a bit of an unfair advantage, and the Americans sort of arced up a little bit about it. And the suspense in all of this was that no one outside of the Australian yacht's crew actually knew what this new keel looked like. Because whenever the boat was being transported, they would keep it covered and hidden. And then whenever it was in the water, it was beneath the waterline. No one could see it. And so the Americans went to heaps of attempts because they were scared of losing this 132-year-old winning streak that they'd been on. And so they attempted to have the yacht disqualified, or at the very least, to have the design of this keel revealed. But the secret of the Australia 2 keel remained hidden. The secret, as I said before, the secret to this yacht's success was what was going on below the waterline. What made it so fast, so stable, was due to parts of the yacht which were hidden from sight. It was what was under the waterline that had the most significant outcome. Below the waterline was where it most counted. And I think that the same can be said of our design as humans. Because as much as we like to highlight and elevate just incredible, extraordinary displays of strength, of beauty and good looks, or of talent, I think what intrinsically moves us the most as men and women are when the intentional qualities or attributes of someone surfaces. As is commonly quoted, and you've probably heard this yourself, it's what's on the inside that matters, right? And so the heart of a man or a woman is what counts the most. It's from the heart where our motivations, where our desires, where our impulses originate from. The lives that we consciously choose to live ultimately play out according to the state of our hearts and what's going on in there. It's in the heart, it's what's below the waterline that counts. Below the waterline is where it most counts. But when we think about it, I guess, this principle swings to the other end of the spectrum as well. Because as much as the heart reveals the best of someone, it also reveals the worst of them. As much as our character, our state of heart, the good and the bad, it eventually displays itself through our behavior. And you and I both know this. Now, coming from a Christian perspective, as followers of Jesus, we would say that our heart has been transformed by knowing and experiencing God. And so when asked why, as followers of Jesus, we would seek to live a life that is potentially and most likely and should be countercultural to the society around us, the lasting conviction and reason is because of a heart change that has occurred within us. It's in the heart that the Lord does his deepest and most powerful work in us. But if the state of our heart is the crucial factor which informs our behavior, then it should be no surprise that it's also at that heart level where the biggest battle occurs. For just as God does his deepest and most powerful work at the heart level, it's at this level that we are also tempted the most. Whether it's our own desire for love or for pleasure or for acceptance or even if it's a lie from the world or Satan, temptation is a battle of the heart. Temptation has the potential to change our hearts. Temptation is a battle of the heart. Now, the Oxford Dictionary defines the word temptation as the desire to do something, especially something that is wrong or unwise. It can also refer to being tested or tried in a trial. Now, from the Christian perspective, this word temptation could therefore be used to describe any desire, any situation, or any trial which has the potential to draw our focus away from God or even replace God entirely as the most important thing in our lives. Temptation has the potential to change the focal point of our hearts. It has the potential to draw our focus away from God and to lead us away from experiencing life in the best way possible. Temptation has the potential to lead us away from experiencing God and therefore experiencing life as God originally intended us to live. Temptation is a battle of the heart. And so that means that the battle takes place under the waterline of our lives. This battle is often takes place out of sight from you and I. Temptation is a battle of the heart. So let me ask you one uncomfortable question. It's going to be the only uncomfortable question of the entire evening. What temptations exist beneath the waterline of your life? Remembering that temptations have the potential to draw our focus off of God or even replace him as the number one purpose of our lives. What temptations exist beneath the waterline of your life? Is it money? Maybe a desire to earn more and more and more to the point where it just becomes like the center point of everything that you do and you organize your entire life around it. Maybe it's a desire for fame, a desire to want to make a name for yourself and to be known by others, so much so that you would do anything to gain notoriety at any expense. Or maybe it's a desire for pleasure, food, sex, and just good times. What temptations exist beneath the waterline of your life? Another way to potentially ask this question is this: what draws your heart away from God? Is it sport? Is it a guy or a girl? Is it your career? Could it be computer games, TV, books? What temptations exist beneath the waterline of your life? And so the question that we have tonight as we approach the part of the Bible that we find ourselves in is this: as followers of Jesus, how are we to respond to temptation in our lives? How are we to respond to the temptations that exist in all of us beneath the water line? Now, in his letter to the followers of Jesus in the city of Corinth, Paul highlights and touches upon the danger of temptation, how it can potentially ruin your life, but he also offers hope, how to respond to and deal with temptation as we encounter it in our day-to-day life. So if you've got your Bibles or your Bible app, get the phone out, don't go to Facebook, turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. While you're flipping there or working out your passcode, let's just reorient ourselves with the context into which these words of this letter Paul writes. As M. Andrews informed us last week in our first week in this series, Corinth was a city that had a lot going for itself. It was a hub of business and activity with lots of people passing through, so things were really quite busy. And in many ways, Corinth was like Melbourne. The people of Corinth were quite cosmopolitan, which meant that there were a lot of different cultures and ideologies that were in one place, and that they were intellectually very, very alert and very materially prosperous as well. But Corinth was also a very spiritual place. There were temples in the city where it was quite common for feasts to occur, where everyone was invited. It was normally put on by the rich people in the city. And as was common in those days, these feasts consisted of a lot of food, a lot of wine, and things would often go downhill after midnight, if you know what I mean. Something as simple as a meal could very quickly lead people at these feasts down a slippery slope towards sexual orgies and all other kinds of things that are typically done in the dark. And it was this social and cultural arena from which people in this city became Christians. And so as they underwent this incredible transformation, there was an immediate demarcation. There was an immediate difference between the lives that these new Christians were called to live and then the general rest of the way that the city lived its life. To say that there were a number of things that could tempt these new followers of Jesus away from their newfound faith is an understatement. These guys were in the thick of it. Name the temptation, name the desire, and these new Christians were surrounded by it. Suffice to say, there are a number of questions that these new Christians had for Paul, all with the same foundational question. As followers of Jesus, how then shall we live? So the passage where we have landed tonight is actually at the back end of a section where Paul is addressing a question that surrounds just the eating of certain types of food, particularly food that was used in like worship services of temples, of other gods, and this food had been offered to idols in the temple. And so for the Corinthian followers of Jesus, now that they were Christians, they no longer worshiped these idols, but apparently they still wanted to be involved in the city's social life. And so they wanted to go along to these awesome feasts because there was good times that were had there. They would eat amazing meat, even though it had been first offered as sacrifices to idols in the temples. And so they began to rationalize. And they felt that as long as they had the proper perspective that these idols were fake, they could give themselves the absolute freedom to participate in these social activities, so long as they didn't succumb to the temptations of sex or idol worship that inevitably was involved and intertwined in these feasts, in these social gatherings. The Corinthian Christians were willing to push the boundaries, to toe the line, to flirt with disaster, because they thought that they were mature enough to resist the temptation to fall back into their old way. But from Paul's perspective, this attitude was like playing with fire. Eventually, you would get burnt. And so it is with this concern that Paul writes these pretty stern words to the Corinthian Christians. So let's just read this. For I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud and that they all passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them, and their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. That's a pretty confusing 4 verses, isn't it? I had a freak out when I first read that. But essentially what goes on is this. Paul summarizes the Old Testament story of the nation of Israel, being saved from slavery from Egypt, and being led by God to another place. If you want to read that story, you can find it in the book of Exodus in the Bible. And here, in these verses, Paul is highlighting how even though the people of Israel experienced powerful spiritual signs of God's power and his favor, they constantly kept on falling into temptation. They constantly kept on experiencing God in a wonderful way and then slipping back into old habits and old lifestyle choices. Even though God was so evidently present, the pull of idols constantly caused the Israelites' focus on God to drift. From Paul's perspective, the constant struggle of the Israelites' wavering faith in God was due to issues below the waterline. Now, if you've studied history at high school, even at uni, you may have heard your professor use this quote. It's by a guy called George Santayana. He's an American philosopher, and he said these words: Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And so Paul brings up this tragic history of the past of this nation of Israel in order that it might serve as a lesson and a warning to the Corinthian Christians, so that hopefully their story might go differently. And he writes this, he says in the very next verse, now these things occurred, talking about what happened to Israel, as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. For Paul, temptation is a battle of the heart. And so in the following verses, Paul lists a number of heart issues which caused the Israelites to go off track. He talks about idolatry, where the Israelites started to worship other gods from the nations around them. He talks about sexual immorality, where the Israelite, particularly the men, were being drawn in by a desire for pleasure. He talks about testing Christ, where the Israelites started to compare God with the gods of the countries around them and sort of saying, like, who's going to benefit me the most? And he talks about complaining about their situation, questioning whether God was good and whether God was actually had a plan for them. And all of these heart issues are, ironically, also the same heart issues that were facing the Corinthian church, the people who Paul's writing this letter to. Paul is hoping that history will serve as a warning to the Corinthian church. Temptation is a battle of the heart. And it is a battle that the Corinthian Christians, just like all followers of Jesus, are in. But Paul finally provides one last stern warning concerning any naivety or apathy that the Corinthian Christians might still have had after reading those first couple of verses, that they weren't in danger of temptation and following like falling back into their old lifestyles. And so he says this: so if you think that you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. Richard Hayes, who's a theologian, he's a very, very smart man. He has this to say about the caution that the Christian Corinthians should have had with regards to idols and with regards to this warning. And he also says about how we should take similar caution as well in our life today. He says this passage raises a flag and summons us to scrutinize our small compromises with the cultural systems around us, because idols have more power than we suppose to reshape us. In our situation today, we may be prone to think that idols are not like really an issue for us, because last time I checked, we don't like have a temple where there's an idol where everyone goes to have feasts and then does naughty stuff afterwards. It's not as clear cut as that today. But our world is still filled with much more subtle things which act to draw our focus and lead our hearts away from God. Temptation is a battle of the heart. And so the question again is, how are we as followers of Jesus supposed to live in a world where we are tempted? How are we to respond to temptation in this battle for our hearts? And so Paul offers this word of encouragement to the Corinthian church. He writes this: no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. There's a couple of really encouraging promises that can be drawn from just these three simple sentences. Firstly, there's a sense of solidarity in the fact that whatever temptation we face it's not unique to just our situation. It's a common experience to mankind. I think that's a really encouraging thing to hear, because that means that there is hope in the fact that whatever struggles that any one of us here tonight have at this particular junction in our lives, there are other people around us, maybe even sitting right next to us, that experience the same struggles. It's good to know we're not alone in this struggle. And secondly, we're given this promise that we won't be tempted beyond what we can bear, and in the times when we do, we find ourselves being drawn away. There will be a way out in order to endure. Let me just read that again. We're given this promise that we won't be tempted beyond what we can bear, and in the times when we do find ourselves being drawn away, there will be a way out in order to endure. I think the most striking thing for me in this verse is it doesn't say that temptations will disappear. It's not like a blue pill, red pill option. Is that Matrix? I hope so. The hook upon which these promises hang and the confidence that we can hold in the reassurances is mentioned right here in this verse. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. God is faithful. This is the hook upon which all of these promises hang. God is faithful. I was thinking about this, and it seriously moves me, because think about it. Even though we as humans, we know that we are prone to giving in to temptation day after day after day, and yet God is faithful. And even though we know that we're horrible at keeping our promises to God, oh my goodness, I don't even want to think about that personally. Regardless of that, God is faithful. And even though we know that our strongly held convictions that we hold one day can collapse just with simple, small compromises the very next day, regardless of that, God is faithful, despite the fact that we are so unfaithful to God over and over and over again, God is faithful. But I guess the biggest question for me is, how can we be assured that God is faithful? How do we really know that God is faithful? Well, when Australia 2, the yacht that I was talking about earlier, remember that no one except a select few people knew what the unique winged keel looked like on this yacht. And the incredible thing that happened is, once Australia 2 crossed the finish line in the best of 7 race series, once they won and they broke this 132-year stranglehold that the Americans had, once that massive success had happened, Alan Bond wanted one thing to happen. As the boat sailed back into the marina, jetty, wherever big boats go, he ordered that the yacht be raised out of the water. And everyone could finally see what this unique winged keel looked like. I was reading like a newspaper article about what happened, and there were stories of people jumping into the water just so that they could touch it, which is a little bit weird. But it was that big of a moment. The whole world was waiting to see what this unique winged keel looked like. When Jesus was lifted up on a cross, that was the paramount moment where God's unquestionable faithfulness was displayed in a completely undeniable way. Jesus dying on a cross, being buried, and then coming back to life again 3 days later provides us with unquestionable certainty that God is faithful. The whole Bible hinges around this big paramount moment. Back to the race, when this keel was finally revealed, it became obvious to everyone the reason why this yacht was so fast. The difference that the keel made between that yacht and everyone else became known. But the ironic thing was that, as I said before, the way it worked was out of sight, beneath the waterline. And I think in a similar way, the work that God can do in our life as a result of Jesus dying on that cross is sort of similar. It's beneath the waterline. It's at that heart level. God transforms us from the inside out. It's in the heart that the Lord does his deepest and most powerful work in us. It's at the heart level where God operates chiefly amongst his people, and it's at the heart level, as a result of being transformed, that God enables us to endure temptation. Because we're never given the promise that temptations will cease to exist, but we are given the promise that temptation will be able to be endured. Temptation is a battle of the heart, but God enables us to endure it. And I think that should be incredible encouragement to each and every single one of us here tonight. Because if you're continuing to fight the battle of temptation that's waging on in your heart, that's awesome. Can I encourage you to keep going, keep doing your accountability groups, keep reading the Bible, keep talking and chatting with your mentors. But I think that there's also some of us here tonight, and we're just feeling utterly defeated by temptation, and as a result, probably sin in our lives. Like, you might find yourself looking at your life and weighing up your thoughts and your words and your actions, and you know that it's not your life, your heart is not in the state that it should be. Right now, it feels as if not only have you lost the battle in your heart, you've lost the entire war. 2 weeks ago, Chris shared about approaching God and asking him to transform us through reading the Bible. And Chris referred to this amazing verse in the book of Hebrews. And it says that Jesus understands our weakness, for he faced all the same testings as we do, and yet he did not sin. Therefore, to endure times when we are tempted or we feel as if we've been defeated and lost the war, regardless of where you find yourself here tonight, going all right in the battle, losing the war, regardless of where you find yourselves tonight, we are told in the very next verse, so let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God, and there we will receive his mercy and we will find grace to help us when we need it the most. Temptation is a battle of the heart, but God enables us to endure it. And we need to respond by inviting God daily to go beneath the waterline of our lives and continuing that transformative work of changing our hearts more and more to be focused completely, 100% on him. The band are going to come up now and they're going to play a song called Shepherd. And the lyrics of this song are great words for you to pray to God. You can say them, you can sing them, you can just think them. They are great words inviting him to transform the parts of our lives that are beneath the water line. So as the band comes up, let's just quickly pray. Lord, I thank you that despite this battle that occurs in each and every single one of us, that you give us a number of amazing promises, that we're not alone in this, that we have friends and family and leaders who experience the same struggles. And so would that reassure us, Lord, that we're not alone in it? And Lord, I just thank you so much that you're in the business of changing hearts and that you're in the business of transforming lives and that you can help us overcome any temptation that we face. And so in this time now, as we sing these words and we sing this song, would you help us to continually make that decision to invite you in and to give you the permission to change our hearts. Transform our lives, Lord, and help us to be better representatives of you. In your name we pray. Amen.